Well, two of the worst things that could have ever happened actually happened. A big YouTube network has finally shut down, and Critical beat me into making a video on it. Now, obviously, after saying that, you'll probably want to click off the video. Fair enough. But in a pathetic attempt to try and one-up him, I'm going to go into all the details and break everything down on how this monolithic company that was basically people's childhood fell off. So as you've heard, Rooster Teeth, this massive machinima company that made a lot of stuff that people watched when they were younger, for example, Red vs. Blue. On March the 6th, Jordan Levin, who was the general manager of Rooster Teeth, basically said that, yep, we're closing, we're shutting up shop. And this includes letting go of around 150 staff members and most likely giving away all their IPs and having their podcast division sold off. And the biggest gut punch of all of this is it was 1 month away from their 21st anniversary. And that would have been the first date where the first episode of Red vs. Blue came out. Yes, it was that long ago. It was 21 years ago. That is horrifying. But obviously, to understand how much of an impact Rooster Teeth had, we need to go back in time a little bit. So way back in the days of old, you may have heard a company called Machinima. And now, like they are dead, they are buried, and everyone is basically just like urinating on their grave because they have no respect. They would lock people into these abhorrent contracts. I myself, I've talked about this numerous times, how years ago, I think this is going like 7 or 8 years ago when I was first blowing up on YouTube, I was locked into these absolutely horrible contracts with Machinima. And at one point they were taking, I think, like 60% of my earnings, and I was trying to get out, but I couldn't get out because the contract was auto-renewing. And then I got this one employee that I was, so fortunate to get hold of, and I was begging him. I was like, please let me out. And then he goes, okay, how about we give you a better percentage cut? And I was like, hell no. I was like that dog pressing the button that goes, hell no. I just wanted to get out. And then he let me go. And then 2 weeks later, his Skype was deleted. So I assume the hitmen took him out. Now, Machinima was associated with Fullscreen, which was another YouTube company. You might remember that with the whole PewDiePie fiasco. Machinima purchased Rooster Teeth, and they also purchased another company called Screw Attack. This was all the way back in 2014. And I'll be honest, like I sound like such a nerd right now, and I sound like a boomer. I'm 26. I'm basically a boomer. I used to love watching Screw Attack. Like, as a child, I never got out the house. You can really tell that I never got out the house. So I'd be playing video games all day and watching YouTube. I was basically the original, child on the iPad watching Roblox and TikToks. And because I didn't get out the house, I would watch a lot of YouTube and I would play a lot of video games, which is basically what, the current generation alpha is doing right now. They're just on their iPad playing Roblox while watching TikToks at the same time. So stuff hasn't really changed. I was a huge nerd for Screw Attack. I loved it. It was hosted by this guy called Stuttering Craig and Handsome Tom. Oh my God, the fact that I remember those names as well. I'm not sure what's happened to them now. I think they're running a podcast or something, but I used to love watching their content because they would do these, top 10 videos, like top 10 scariest levels. Like, looking back on it, it was nothing special. It was basically just Watch Mojo, but for video games. But I loved it. I think I was literally like 13 at the time. So Screw Attack was then merged with Rooster Teeth. Now, Machinima, as we know, is defunct. Thank the Lord, baby Jesus. But their successor was Fullscreen. And Fullscreen, which is also now defunct, they're like a subsidiary of Warner. They were owned by Otter Media. No association with the Otter from that scary horror game I played a couple weeks back. Now, Otter Media is owned, again, by Warner Brothers Discovery. So again, like I've mentioned so many companies owning companies, and so many of them have shut down. It's like that old lady who swallowed a fly, but in corporate terms. Now, being a cog for mega corporations can only get you so far. That's why I myself, despite working for Google and YouTube, being a little corporate underling, I've chose to sell out as much as possible, and I now have some exclusive merch which you can pick up right now. Now, Rooster Teeth, because they had this Warner money, they released a couple of films, and to be fair, Warner have actually tried to experiment in a lot of franchises. You might have seen this film that came out all the way back in 2006 with Keanu Reeves. It's called A Scanner Darkly, where everything is rotoscoped, so it's like they actually filmed it and then they drew over each, frame of animation. That's really cool. Unfortunately, the film was such a flop that it killed that entire independent funded part of Warner. But again, they're down for experimenting. Machinima had numerous films, for example, Laser Team 1, that also got a sequel. There was something called Bloodfest as well. And because they're involved in video games so much, they developed their own, like, for example, The Vicious Circle. Now, looking at the screenshots of this game, it's obviously a complete flop, because there's next to no reviews of it. But it looks like a mix between Overwatch and High on Life, that Justin Roiland Rick and Morty game. Oh, wait, no, I've scrolled down. It has a battle pass. Of Of course it has a battle pass. Everything needs to have a battle pass. I like how they don't even wait to see like if the game's going to take off or not. They just immediately put a battle pass into it. But they have had some successes, like for example, Bendy and the Ink Machine, which they did publish. By the way, I just tried to download Vicious Circle to give it a try because it just looks so bad, but you actually can't get it on Steam anymore, despite being able to get the Founders Pack, which is absolutely free. But getting DLC for a game that isn't available anymore, kind of pointless. Now, you're probably wondering, how did Rooster Teeth fell off? How did they lose all their money, all their credibility to the point that they had to shut down? Well, this is a death of 1,000 cuts, and Rooster Teeth literally had their dick in their hands. So some of these I've already talked about in past videos because they were huge at the time, but I've got an entire timeline of how they basically fell off. In February the 5th, 2019, Vic Mignogna, who was a very popular voice actor who worked on Rooster Teeth's anime series RWBY, they were given the boot after years and years of allegations of sexual harassment that were, brought to the public eye. Also, on October 6th, 2020, Ryan Haywood, who was actually a member of the Achievement Hunter group, the whole Rooster Teeth thing, he was given the boot after allegedly, trying to fuck a fan. Now, he was 36 at the time, the fan was 17, and he was also married, so giga uber cringe. And then Achievement Hunter and Rooster Teeth proceeded to basically delete a ton of videos, including him in it. And then on top of that as well, a Rooster Teeth executive, Michael Quinn, was charged with family violence through aggravated assault, second-degree felony, and the guy was in jail as of 2022. Now, September the 12th, 2019, things only got worse because Rooster Teeth ended up laying off 13% of its entire staff workforce.
There's about 50 people, 50 talented, hardworking people who woke up this morning and probably wanted nothing more than to go to work and to do their jobs. And for those people who no longer have that option, it'd be fucking disrespectful for me not to come in and do my job.
And then November 15th, 2023, which I talked about in a previous video, they had huge layoffs in the animation industry, and they were being let go or leaving due to these horrible, horrendous crunch times or salary issues. Now, this part is really depressing because I'm going into detail about all these staff, basically the talent, the people that made Achievement Hunter and Rooster Teeth and all these other sub-companies stand out, and unfortunately, they had to leave or passed away. So all the way back in April 2015, Ray Navarez Jr., who was always known as this huge Achievement Hunter sweat, I think at one point he nearly actually had the most amount of gamer score on the Xbox 360 because this guy, his entire bit was just farming achievements. He left Rooster Teeth to basically focus on his own stuff. And then in February 2015, Monty Oum, who was Rooster Teeth's lead animator, passed away in a coma due to really severe allergic reactions. Fast forward a couple years to April 2018, Mika Burton, who was a staff member and worked as an editor and a host of many of the shows, left the company after harassment from other employees and also the community at large. And then Fiona Nova also had similar problems and complained to HR. Apparently they did absolutely nothing. I want to point out, this is how so many of these huge companies implode, because their HR department is absolutely terrible and they basically brush actual problems aside. And then in June 2019, Gray Haddock, who was Monty's successor for the head of animation, he ended up leaving after apparently mismanagement of animation budgets and not paying properly, and apparently enforcing a really bad culture around crunch hours. And as we know, with all these video games, all these shows, crunch hours and crunch times are just absolutely horrendous. A little bit of a side note here, but recently I've been playing through Tomb Raider a lot, mostly because the first 3 original games have been remastered and they have done an amazing job on that. It is not a lazy remaster at all, but that then led me down the rabbit hole of watching documentaries about how terrible the crunch culture was around Core, this company, trying to get these Tomb Raider games out, to the point that they absolutely hated their games. I didn't even know this, but at the end of the PS1 era of Tomb Raider games, they purposely killed off Lara Croft because they didn't actually want to work on the games anymore. They hated it so much. The money was great, the sales were great, the reputation they had was amazing, but they hated it. They were crunched so much that they ended up hating their own product. And the Tomb Raider games would have actually ended at the PS1 era if the producers didn't retcon and basically say an entire tomb collapsing in on her was she's going missing, instead of actually dying, which was what she was meant to be doing.
No time. Your hands, Lara. Give me your hands. Take my hand. I can pull you to safety.
Good to see you again, Lana.
I couldn't leave you.
Now, you might also know the company Funhouse, which is part of Rooster Teeth. This was a group of people basically doing like, you know, kind of gaming, funny moments kind of stuff. Well, two of the founding members of that, Bruce Green and Lawrence Sontag, they actually left to go freelance. But then apparently after Bruce reported what Adam was doing to HR, he was laughed at and completely disregarded. And then in June 2020, Bernie Burns, I'm not joking, that is their actual name, Bernie Burns, one of the co-founders of Rooster Teeth, leaves the company and then moves to Scotland. I have no idea why you moved to Scotland. As I've talked about, the only thing they have there is Shrek and the Willy Wonka AI experience. And then in May 2021, Jeremy Dooley, another Achievement Hunter member, leaves for Twitch, just like Ray did that I talked about earlier. And then in October 2022, another member called Caden, which I talked about in a previous video, had a bunch of like transphobic abuse against her and left the company because of that. There was like slurs in the office, workplace harassment, not being paid for a year, and basically no compensation. And then Matt Bragg, another Achievement Hunter member, was also laid off. And then Alana Pierce, who was like an Inside Gaming member, she leaves and basically works for Sony's Santa Monica studio. And on top of all of this as well, you had so many huge companies within Rooster Teeth that basically had to close down. You had Screw Attack back in 2019, they shut down, and I think they were rebranded into the Death Battle channel. And then in May 2019, Sugar Pine 7, they'd left Rooster Teeth and then closed in June. Now, Sugar Pine 7 are a really weird one because they were originally like a vlog channel. If you look at their channel now, it basically is just podcasts and they're not really getting a lot of views at all. And the funny thing is, their vlog content is what they're most known for. And if you go on their most popular videos, you can see, you know, 2 mil, 1 mil, 1 mil, pretty decent views. And then their most viewed video is Sexy Nightmare with a woman with basically everything but her nipples showing, 25 million views. YouTube was definitely a very different landscape back then. Now, this is some really sad news, which I'm sure we all know about. In December 2019, Cow Chop, which was like one of my favorite channels, disbanded. Their final video on their channel still being the final interview. And then in September 2023, Achievement Hunter, which was basically Rooster Teeth's single biggest money-making channel, they disbanded again and everyone went their separate ways. And then bizarrely on the same month, Rooster Teeth actually ended up deleting a lot of their Red vs. Blue episodes. And the only place where you can view most of them now is on their website, which basically means that they nuked around 180 million views from their own YouTube channel. So that was a lot to get through. I understand, it was a laundry list of accusations, allegations, people leaving, stuff shutting down, people passing away. It was an insane amount to get through, but now hopefully you understand that there wasn't one single thing that caused the death of Rooster Teeth. It really was like a myriad of like a couple dozen things. Now, the next question is, what's going to happen now? The fact that Rooster Teeth is probably shutting down. Well, like I said, Warner Media owns the majority of Rooster Teeth. Well, they pretty much own the company. So what they're probably going to do is get all the IPs that are worth money, not a lot right now, cut them up and basically sell them off. This is what happens with a lot of video game companies. Like, for example, when THQ went completely bankrupt, I think they basically had to sell all their IPs to even make money back. Now, the most successful IPs they have at the minute is, of course, Ruby, the funny anime show that I still haven't watched a single episode of, Genlock, and Camp Camp. Now, these are probably going to be picked up by different branches of Warner Bros. or, like I said, sold off to companies. Now, there is another offshoot of Rooster Teeth that I haven't talked about, and this is the Roost Network. Roost Network basically operates as an MCN, a multi-channel network. They're basically the people that you have kind of overwatching your channel. They'll do anything from getting you brand deals, supporting you, helping you with limited ads, copyright strikes, all the boring stuff behind the scenes so you can actually focus on making content. Now, there's actually a lot of shows that are under the Rooster Network, some which I didn't even know of. You might have seen Anthony Padilla's I Spent a Day With, where more and more people that appear on his show aren't even actually there. It's just like drawn art or something. The H3H3 podcast as well. The Dead Meat podcast, which is home to the Kill Count, that do like breakdowns of horror films, explaining the plot when a character dies, doing a little bit of a behind the scenes dive as well. And they also do the Kind of Funny podcast, which at the minute, the views... There might be a view or two, not much more than that. Now, another factor that I haven't talked about for the closure of Rooster Teeth is they fell off. And I don't mean that in like a really snide way. I mean genuinely, like over the years, they have got less views, less subscribers. And unfortunately, that probably stems from not being able to adapt to the digital age, in the sense of everything now has to be a short, everything has to be a TikTok. A good example is nowadays on YouTube, the fastest growing channels aren't people that do long form videos. They're not even people that do like 8-minute commentary slop. It's people that do shorts. You'll see people that do like some of the most mind-numbing, inane content, like just reacting to another video, not even giving any substance, and they will be the fastest growing channel. And then you'll see them bragging on Twitter that they've got like 200 million views in a month, like nearly as much as like a Mr. Beast second channel. But then they never obviously show their earnings, because when you're a shorts merchant, you get these insane inflated views, and then you make about $7. It's a very weird transitional period at the minute, and I think Rooster Teeth weren't really able to get on top of that. Obviously, the other stuff I've talked about as well, like some of the talent not being appropriate with fans, talent ending up leaving for better opportunities, better work, better pay, better HR. And then there was a lot of concepts and ideas that really bloated the channel to that would be great at the time, but long term they wouldn't really be successful. Like, for example, the show Genlock spending a lot of money to hire really big actors like Michael B. Jordan, David Tennant, but then getting mid views, basically no return whatsoever. And then one of the higher ups, Jordan, actually wrote a letter saying it was the cause of monetization shifts, platform algorithms, advertising challenges, and the ebb and flow of patronage. All these converging factors have led to many closures in the industry. So overall, there have been many reasons why Rooster Teeth basically fell off. But I'm going to end this video with a line from one of my favorite characters from Red vs. Blue, Caboose. Time is not made out of lines. It is made out of circles. That's why clocks are round. Thank you for watching.